What's cracking, y'all? You are now watching Boo TV. Appreciate you for stopping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and let's get into the topic for today. What's cracking? So, a couple days ago, Stephen A. Smith put out a segment from his podcast that had to do with his evaluation of the top point guard of all time, Magic Johnson versus Steph Curry, which was based on Steph Curry going on Gilbert Arenas' podcast and then initially saying that he was the best point guard of all time when asked the question about it, and then immediately after would follow that up by saying, me and Magic are in the conversation. I think he backpedaled a little bit when he realized what he said. It's a little. I'm not a big fan of players necessarily publicly calling themselves great. If you think that, keep that to yourself, man. Be humble. But to each their own. I'm not a fan of it. I think it's gross. LeBron does it. Has been doing it. Now Steph is doing it. And neither one of those guys do I think they're the greatest of all time or the greatest of all time at their position. But that's nonetheless. And I had originally recorded a video reacting and responding to Stephen A. and Steph Curry and what they said. Long story short, life got real busy with work, other things, and I never got a chance to edit the video. And by the time I came around to getting a chance to edit the video, I find out that on that very same topic, Michael Jordan texted Stephen A. Smith to settle the greatest point guard of all time discussion. So I was like, well, I'm just not even going to put out the initial video now that I recorded. I'm just going to react to MJ, Stephen A. Smith going at it. So I'm here for it. Let's see what Mike, in my opinion, the greatest player of all time, had to say. Let's get into it.
Over the last few days, you guys have heard me talk about Steph Curry versus Magic Johnson in the GOAT conversation pertaining to point guards in NBA history. To some people, I was sacrilegious the other day, downright blasphemous, because I had the audacity, the unmitigated gall, to imply that Steph Curry may very well be the best point guard in the history of the game. Obviously, there were a plethora of people who disagreed with me. And I got news for you. I got a lot more to say about this because it needs to be said. Because I did say it. There was a reason I said it. Knowing I got to see Magic Johnson sooner than later, I mean, that's a very risque proposition on my part. But damn it, I say what I mean and I mean what I say. And if I'm not sure, I'm going to acknowledge I'm not sure. I will confess, listening to my guy, Eddie Johnson. Eddie Johnson is a former NBA player, was a damn good NBA player. 6'8", small forward, played on a plethora of teams, including the Phoenix Suns. Hell of a player. Now hosts a show on NBA radio. He was filling in this morning with Mitch Lawrence, formerly of the New York Daily News, been an outstanding NBA reporter for decades. And he was just schooling folks on, the point guard position, which sort of mirrors what my assistant, Sumatra, who thinks that she's a basketball aficionado, he was just echoing and mirroring what she said. I have to confess, he made some very compelling points. I have to even confess this even more. Actually, what he said sound very, very similar to what Sumatra was saying, which means that she had a good point too. And he was talking about how the operative word to describe a point guard is supposed to be facilitator. Somebody who creates opportunities for others to score. And Eddie Johnson was fixated on that point, and I give him credit for that. But he wasn't the only one. On Wednesday mornings on ESPN's First Take, #1 sports morning show in America for the last 12 years and counting, by the way, Mad Dog Russo, that's his day to appear on First Take. And he was on with me this morning. And here's what he had to say when people told him that Magic Johnson may very well be eclipsed in some people's eyes as the best point guard in the world in the history of basketball by none other than Steph Curry. Listen to what Mad Dog Russo had to say. Listen to my follow. Here it is.
Magic Johnson is the only player who I've seen, there's only 2 or 3 of them, who could dominate a game at that position without putting the ball in the basket. What is the definition of a point guard? You know what the definition? Bob Cousy always used to say this, the great Bob Cousy. When you cross midcourt, your first objective is to get a teammate a good shot. Magic Johnson, when he crossed midcourt, his first objective was to get a teammate a good shot.
Pause. I just recently put out a video about Mad Dog Russo saying that he's the most important person right now with regards to basketball on mainstream media, because he keeps all the old greats' name alive and reminds us of them. And he just mentioned Bob Cousy, insert, you know what I mean?
Curry, in a lot of ways, his first objective is what 35-footer I can make.
What I'm thinking about is the modern day game and the word impact. And I'm thinking about Steph Curry's extraordinary marksmanship and his movement without the basketball, and how it forces a defense to have their head on a swivel. And as a result, it facilitates others like Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole when he was there to do what Worthy, Byron Scott, and others were able to do statistically for the Los Angeles Lakers while Magic Johnson was a point guard. I think we're both right. I think we both have good points. If you're talking about the quintessential prototypical point guard, Eddie Johnson and Mad Dog Russo has a point. I'll tell you somebody else who does have a point as well. It would happen to be somebody that texted me this morning at 5:54 a.m. that wrote a pretty long-ass quote and then gave me permission, which he almost never does, to quote him publicly and tell the world what he said. Ladies and gentlemen, weighing in on Steph Curry and whether or not he's the greatest point guard in NBA history over Irvin Magic Johnson is none other than Michael Jordan himself. And here was his quote to me. "Good morning, sir. Although greatest of anything is always a debate, I beg to differ on your greatest point guard of all time. Magic Johnson is easily the best point guard of all time. Steph is very close, but not in front of Magic. You must define point guard to have a serious debate. Steph is by far the best shooter ever. Yes, his movement has created many shots for his teammates. Career 42% three-point range. But Magic Johnson invented the triple-double. Not truly invented, but makes it more noticeable of the impact he had on the game. It's a point guard stat, to be honest. He was the best. We can go on, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. You get the point. By the way, Magic has 5 championships. None other than Michael Jeffrey Jordan. To yours truly, this morning before I went on First Take. By the way, I say permission because I don't quote people when they say stuff to me off the record unless they give me permission to quote them. That is the respectable, decent, the ethical thing to do. But I don't think that people are getting my argument. So to Eddie Johnson and Mad Dog Russo and to the great Michael Jordan, let me expound on my point. We're not going to bring up numbers, three-pointers by Steph Curry, 3,390, assists, 5,440. Okay, we're not going to do all of that, okay? We know that Steph Curry is a prolific scorer, arguably a top 5 scorer, top 10 scorer in the history of basketball, clearly the greatest shooter that God ever created. We know all of that. What I was alluding to was impact. That's what I was alluding to. And I want everybody to understand that. When Eddie Johnson and Mad Dog Russo and to some degree Michael Jordan talk about Magic Johnson, they're talking about the facilitator. Nobody led a fast break the way that he did. Nobody could be 6'9" and dribble the basketball and throw no-look passes and passes behind his back and all of this stuff the way Magic Johnson did. Magic Johnson was phenomenal and fantastic and all of that stuff. And I'm not disputing that. Magic Johnson is the greatest facilitator that we have ever seen at the point guard position in the history of basketball. What I was trying to say is that when you're thinking about Steph Curry, I'm talking about impact. I'm saying his marksmanship from long range, from 20, from 30, from 40, from the corner, from the wing, from the top of the key and beyond. I'm talking about a guy that you literally have to guard the moment he steps past half court. That guy is who I'm talking about. It's not just that makes him great because of his impact. What makes him great is his ability to move without the basketball. He's always moving. And because he's always moving, a defense's head is on a swivel. Because their head is on a swivel, they can't key in on other dudes. That's why Klay Thompson could average what he averages in some people's eyes, even though I think Klay Thompson is great. That's why Jordan Poole averaged what he averaged, even though I think he'll do good things in Washington this year because the brother could play and he could score. When you have a Steph Curry, you have to constantly keep your eyes on him. You can't double others. You got to double him. And from an impact perspective on the offensive side of the ball, that's what makes him great. Yeah, he might be moving without the ball and positioning himself to get the ball back so he could shoot. But he also facilitates an easier life for his teammates because of the threat that he is. That was Magic Johnson in a different way. When you put the Magic Johnson in a half-court situation, he threw the ball to Kareem. In the open court, it's a fast break. It's James Worthy on one wing. It's Byron Scott and Norm Nixon before him on another. It's Michael Cooper trailing. Or Kurt Rambis later on. Or Michael Thompson. People like that. Or Bob McAdoo, the great Bob McAdoo. All of those things are happening. I'm simply saying Steph Curry's impact on the offensive end of the floor is that lethal because of his marksmanship, his willingness and ability to move without the basketball, and the fact that a defense is absolutely petrified and their head is on a swivel. Because if you watch defenders who defend against Steph Curry, the minute he launches a shot, if they don't block it, they literally go, damn, and turn around because they know it's going in. That's how lethal this brother is. Most people in the NBA couldn't shoot 40% from three-point one season. He's done it practically his whole career, with the exception of his injury-riddled season when he only played about 5 games. And oh, by the way, he's a career 42.8% three-point shooter. The brother is on another level. That's all I was trying to say. Facilitator goes to Magic Johnson, Sumatra. It goes to Magic Johnson. But potency and impact, one could argue, belongs to Steph Curry. That's all I was trying to say. But Eddie Johnson was absolutely right. He wasn't wrong. Mad Dog Russo made valid points. And Michael Jeffrey Jordan, the greatest who has ever lived as far as I'm concerned, definitely made his points. And I just wanted to make sure that I was clear about that with everybody else.
Here's Stephen A. again with his, I just wanted to make this clear. This is what this guy does. And I know he does this on purpose. He pretty consistently does not give direct answers to allow himself wiggle room to backpedal on a notion or idea. So he can always be like, no, you misinterpreted what I said. This is what I meant. This is what I meant. Because originally the video I had responded to, at the end of it, there was a caller that popped up and was like, Stephen A., are you saying Steph Curry is the greatest point guard of all time? No, I want you to say it. Say Steph Curry's the greatest point guard of all time. And he danced around it and would not say it. For that, this is what this guy does. So many times he just can't say yes or no. He has to walk that line. He has to be in that gray area so he can backpedal when somebody calls his ass out. Tell you, man, I've been saying this about this guy. This is what he does. This is what he does. So, I'm not going to get into all the numbers and accolades, Steph Curry versus Magic Johnson, because Magic Johnson pretty much wins all those down the board. Now, even though that may be the case, I take everything in the context. At Steph Curry, where he's at right now in his career, they've played roughly the same amount of seasons. Obviously, like Mike said, Magic has one more championship. But, you know, you can talk about how Steph Curry changed the league, and I think that's a little bit blown out of proportion to a degree. Yes, he had something to do with it, with his marksmanship from three ball and being allowed to shoot from long distances by his coach without repercussion. But yeah, you have to credit also the mind of Mike D'Antoni and his offense, and how that moved the league forward for years in style of play, fast tempo, getting up more 3-point shots, focusing on more 3-point shots and passing. That had a lot to do with it too. And then you couple that with the rule changes over the years that allows for more spacing, less physicality. That had something to do with it, and that fostered in Steph Curry as the icing on the cake, and now you have what you have today. It wasn't just Steph Curry. I need people to understand that. I don't think Mike D'Antoni gets enough credit for that, to be honest. People act like right when Steph Curry arrived in his prime that all of a sudden, boom, we went from a non-3-point shooting league to a 3-point shooting league. No, that's not the case. There was a gradual transition over the years with the increase in 3-point shooting. I got to make that clear. I've always like that's not completely true, and though he does get credit for it, but the thing is that's what we see, right? Right, that's what we see on the surface is what Steph Curry's doing. Then everybody tries to emulate him, but the seeds had already been planted before Curry. I have to throw that out there, and I love Steph Curry, man. So you want to talk about change the game, yeah, but Magic Johnson, along with Larry Bird, came into a league that was sitting on life support. Life support being Julius Erving, really. And then they, brought it off life support and gave the league new life, new energy, new fandom, a new vibe. They did that together. And Magic Johnson introduced Showtime basketball. They had a good team, but the one piece they were missing was Magic Johnson. They had an all-star there already in Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and all they were missing was Magic Johnson. And once they got Magic, he had his wingman already as a rookie. Led him to a championship. With his epic finals clinching game. Dropping what did he drop, like 45 points? 42 points, 15 rebounds. And played center because Kareem was injured. And Magic, along with Bird, dominated that entire decade of basketball, and they didn't play a lengthy 20-year career. Like Magic played 13, 14 seasons, and you couple that in with his retirements and whatnot. Introduce a style of fast break that really we had never seen before. Honestly, you could talk about the impact of Steph Curry's shooting and his movement out the basketball, but I could say Magic Johnson's ability to pass the ball and find open guys in areas where you wouldn't think passes were possible. Magic Johnson could put a pass through, whizzing it by defenders' heads, whizzing it by their bodies, had no idea. Like Magic Johnson, there could be a brick wall in front of you, and you'll try to pass a ball through the brick wall and it'll bounce back in your face. But Magic Johnson has that ball, passes it through the brick wall, and it phases through. And you're like, how the hell did he do that? I'm gonna have to do I'm gonna have to do a Magic Johnson reaction video soon, very very soon, if not today, the next day, so you can see for those of you young cats that follow don't understand the wizardry of Magic Johnson and how he dominated the game passing the basketball. It's crazy. And 6'9", he wasn't like his body wasn't a traditional point guard. Steph Curry has the body for the traditional point guard, but he had a big body, but he could do everything you would expect a point guard to do. I mean, he to this day he still holds the record for most assists per game in NBA history for a career with over 11. He delivered the passes and fundamentally and also flashy and still in an accurate way, man. He was incredible. And you want to compare defense to both these guys. So let's say you want to say, all right, it's a stalemate. Magic's impact on the court through his passing and his size, opposed to Curry with his shooting and his movement out the basketball. All right, so okay, whatever. Let's look at the defensive end. Neither one of these guys are really known for their defensive prowess. But one thing Magic Johnson was a liability on defense. Steph Curry was, for the most of his career, a liability. Magic really was never that. And the good thing is Magic had that size where he could play all five positions. And when he actually put forth the effort, he was solid. I'm not saying he was an all-world defender, but he was solid and could do it. And listen, like I said, the way the game has changed and flourished, it has allowed Curry to be this version of who he is. And yes, he took it and then he added something to it, like I said. But, Magic kind of created a brand of basketball when he came in. Really did. Really did. And there have been great point guards before him that could do things on a fast break, but not like Magic. And they couldn't pass like Magic. Not quite like Magic. He made you look at the pass in a whole different light. This Magic Johnson. Seriously. And one thing I have to take in consideration, and I hate doing this, I really do, is but sometimes I think it's it's a reasonable point to bring up, and I think this one it is. If you even want to cross errors, you take Magic Johnson, the exact version of Magic Johnson, and pop him in today's league. You talk about his numbers; they're gonna go up even more. He's gonna be even more impactful. The way the lanes are wide open now, he would get more points and more assists and more rebounds. I think that has to be said. Well, I think if you put Steph in the old eras, I think he would be a slightly lesser version of himself due to the physicality and the hand checking and stuff. I think he would be a slightly lesser version of himself. And I really do hate doing that sometimes, but I think sometimes there can be a solid case made for it. And I kind of look at that too. I think Magic Johnson could have played in any era, right? My personal opinion. And Magic's shooting actually, Steph Curry's by far and away, to me, undisputed, the greatest 3-point shooter I've ever seen. Really was. He really is. As Magic got older, his shooting improved. I'm not saying defenses were guarding him to score. I get that, but his shooting improved. There even at least one season, maybe more, where he shot over 90% from the free throw line. And you know something, even in that, what, was it 95, 96? I could be wrong, but that 95-ish, 96 season-ish, when Magic came back, only played like 30-something plus games, came back in January, had a lesser role. Even in that lesser role, he was still putting up some good stats, all things considered. And he ultimately, after they lost in the playoffs in the first round, he decided to retire. But initially, he was trying to get a contract with a different team or play another career, but then decided, you know what, I just want to go out on my own terms. I didn't get to do that before, but this time I am. But I really feel like he could have been good to go for a good 15 to 18 points per game, 8 to 10 assists, 6 to 8 rebounds. I think he still had that in him with an increased role. But he didn't have that when he came back halfway through the year, probably a little more than halfway through the year. But yeah, I think Magic Johnson is the greatest point guard of all time. I agree with Michael Jordan, 100%. I think Michael Jordan brought up some great points. I think Mad Dog brought up good points, and Stephen A. brought up good points too. I'll give him that. I think there's some accuracy and truth in what everybody was pretty much saying. So I guess it depends on how you weigh it. And from what I've seen from Magic Johnson and what I understand to be his impact, I would have to say he's still the greatest point guard of all time. I mean, and I've seen Steph, and Magic came in killing from the rip. It took Curry years before he got settled into the Steph Curry that we know today, like 4 or 5 years. And actually, he didn't really have that really big breakout season, where they ended up losing to the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think he might have been like 6 or 7 years in at that point, where they were lighting people up. So yeah, I have to throw that out there. And I understand when Steph came in, like he was getting minutes early on, but Monte Ellis was still on the team initially and was really getting the bulk of the shots. So I get that too. But I promise you this, that tells you the difference in greatness. If that was Magic Johnson that came on the team, you think Monte Ellis is handling the ball as much as he is? Nah, they giving that ball to Magic. That's our facilitator. That's our point guard. His passing was incredible, man. Whew. For me, definitely the best passer I've ever seen. And I got a couple other people after him. I got to do an all-time ranking list for greatest passer of all time. I mean, and Magic's not even my favorite point guard of all time. There's no bias here. My favorite point guard of all time, my favorite is Jason Kidd. I love Jason Kidd. That's my guy. And I'll rock with him from beginning to the end for point guard. He's my favorite. Magic's not even my favorite. I don't know. But yeah. I think I like everything Mike had to say. But yeah, I think Steph Curry, uh, yeah, probably second greatest point guard of all time. That's going to be hard to debate at this point. But Steph Curry right now, he's not even in my top 10. He's somewhere between 11 and 15. I haven't really sat down and thought about my rankings from 11 to 20. But without thinking about it, Steph Curry is somewhere for me between 11 and 15. Could be 11, could be 15. I don't know. I have to sit down and think about it. But even if Steph Curry wins one more championship and he gets 5, I still don't think that's enough for me to put him ahead of Magic Johnson. I don't. I really don't. I can't say that. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens as time goes on. But you're going to have to put some more work in for me to put you over Magic, my guy. My guy. Anywho, that's all I got to say about it. I don't want to ramble on too long. Salute Michael Jordan. Salute Chris Mad Dog Russo. And Stephen A. Smith. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think about it. Hit the bell. Stay notified. Catch you on the next one. We out, baby.